I'll be very honest that in my years of working as a lawyer, I did not really know the concept of litigation financing. When I came back to India, a very dear friend of mine and also my mentor introduced me to Kundan, who has founded litigation funding in India and is the founder of Legal Pay. When I spoke to him, I then realized that this is also such a great investment product. Your ROI is almost 3x to 4x.
How big is the Western market as compared to the market in India?
Across the globe, that figure stands at about 400 billion.
I was told that litigation financing was considered as illegal back in India. Is that true? Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Alt Investor Podcast, where we provide you with the knowledge you need to make informed decisions about alternative investments. I am your host, Yash Roonghta. Today, we have a very special guest from the litigation financing industry, a sector that's gaining traction in the West, but it's still relatively unknown in India. Some of you might already be familiar with this startup via our blog. Please join me in welcoming Tanya Prasad, CIO and Head of Legal at Legal Pay. Tanya, we are delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Thank you, Yash, for having me here. I have also been a part of this community, the Alt Investors. So I've seen so many of your episodes and I've seen your journey through this blog.
Thank you.
So it's an honor for me to be here and to be able to speak to you and all of your viewers and really feel like an integral part of this community.
Great. So let's start with who you are, Tanya, for our viewers, because of course people might have checked out your LinkedIn profile, but what has been your journey like? How did you come at Legal Pay? What are you trying to solve at Legal Pay? Let's start with all of that.
So professionally, I'm a lawyer. I have almost 10 years of experience in the field. I have actually experimented a lot in the initial part of my career. And interestingly, today my core area may be arbitration, which is how I got into litigation financing. But I started off as a divorce lawyer, which is so far away from what I do right now, but that's how I started. I worked for one of the best divorce lawyers in the country. My field was matrimonial law for 2 years. After that, straight away, I joined indirect tax practice at PwC, which was again a jump into very unfamiliar territory. And while I was doing this, I always also tell my juniors that, see, early years of your practice in law, you should experiment. See what you like. The day you find something you love, I'm sure it's not going to feel like so much of a work anymore. Of course, it's work at the end of the day, but if you love it, you will want to do that and be happy doing it. It's after PwC that I finally got a chance to work at Karanjawala. It's a very reputed chamber of law, actually a firm practice in Delhi. And I got to join the newly formed arbitration team.
Okay.
At that point of time, I had very minimal knowledge of what arbitration is. A very basic information is what a general lawyer would do. Once I got to know and I learned so much, I think about 2 years in, I'd found that this is what I want to do. An arbitration lawyer is who I want to be. And I got great exposure in terms of domestic arbitrations, international commercial arbitrations. And that led me to do my master's almost about 8 years into practice.
Okay.
And I moved to Germany. So I joined Humboldt University in 2021 and their arbitration course is quite prestigious. So I did that. And there I studied with 27 of the most brilliant international lawyers from across the world, which led to a more deepened understanding of what law is and how is arbitration done across the world. Interestingly, it's also at that point that I had my first brush with litigation financing. I'll be very honest that in my years of working as a lawyer, I did not really know the concept of litigation financing. Yes, I'd heard of third-party funding. I think third-party funding is a term that is more commonly used in India. But I didn't really know how does it work, why would you need it, because I never really felt the need to explore it. So back to Germany, I read about Nivalian. Nivalian does a lot of investment work in litigation side in Europe.
Okay.
And that's how I understood what it meant. And at that point, I realized that this is such a brilliant vertical. You know, it takes the burden away from a litigant. You're basically fighting a litigation with a free mind. It's a non-recourse funding. So this isn't really in form of a loan. If you lose the case, the funder, you don't have to return the money back to the funder. And if you win, for all the effort and investment that has been put in, you just have to part with a small percentage. So overall, for a litigant, it's such a great product. And that is how I saw it that time. When I came back to India, a very dear friend of mine and also my mentor introduced me to Kundan, who has founded litigation funding in India and is the founder of Legal Pay. When I spoke to him, I then realized that this is also such a great investment product. Because you, globally, if you see, in a product like this, your ROI is almost 3x to 4x.
Okay.
On an average, which is, and your IRR, if you see, mostly on commercial matters, is almost, I would say, 45%. So when you see returns like this, you realize that this makes for a brilliant product. When I joined Legal Pay is when I started doing my research to really see how are countries like US, countries in Europe doing it. Then we sat down to see, okay, is this model something that we can replicate in India? So this has been my journey of how I went on from being a matrimonial lawyer to finally being an arbitration lawyer and now entering the field of litigation finance in India.
Very impressive. Can you give an example of litigation financing for our viewers?
Yes. So let me just break down what it means first.
Sure.
Litigation financing as a concept is very simple. Today, if you have a case that you want to fight, I tell you that, see, I will invest in that matter. I will pay your lawyers. I will pay the court fee. You don't have to worry about anything.
Okay.
We get the lawyers of your choice. You get an expert opinion on your matter. So you get everything you need to fight your case in a good way.
Okay.
Finally, when you win the case and the court awards you a certain amount of money for what you asked for, we take a small percentage of that in return for the investment that we've made.
Okay.
That is simply what litigation financing means. It's a very straightforward concept.
And why would someone need that kind of money in terms of financing?
That's a brilliant question. Let's take an example of a small technology company.
Okay.
It's a startup. Now they've made some sort of a proprietary hardware or software program. You're approached by, say, a Fortune 500 company. Maybe they decide to collaborate with you. You sign an agreement. There is, of course, a process of due diligence that goes in before any partnership. You then realize that, okay, there is a considerable amount of confidential information that you had to pass on to them for the due diligence. For some reason or the other, that relationship does not go through.
Okay.
A few months down the line, you see that giant company has released a very similar platform as yours. So now today you're in a position that your information has been taken away, right? You don't have the money to go up. I mean, you're a startup. You have a very thinly maintained litigation budget.
Sure.
How would you expect to fight a company with that size? And where are you going to bring the money from? If you plug in your existing capital in that litigation, how will your company run? So if you have to choose between running your company and fighting a litigation, what will you do?
Run the company.
And I think that is a very unfair position to be in. Why should you be treated like, I mean, it's a classic battle of David versus Goliath. That is where the role of litigation funders has always come in. The inception of this concept was deeply rooted in the fact that everybody should be on an equal playing field when it comes to litigation. In such a scenario, we would take over that burden, let you run your company, we finance it, we see you've got a strong case. Now, you are also rest assured that yes, you are being represented. There are lawyers fighting for your cause, and that burden is not on you to pay them. You don't have to pay the arbitral tribunal, or you don't have to pay the particular court the case has gone in. And then you come out as a winner, right? Which is the situation where you want to be in, because see, justice should be accessible for everyone.
Sure.
Right? Whether it be for smaller companies, whether it be for individuals. So that is the core tenet from where litigation funding arose. Of course, then it then went on to also be an excellent investment product with time.
You have mentioned the word arbitration a couple of times. Can you explain what arbitration is as well?
All right. So that's a good question. Okay, so let me first tell you, what does litigation mean? The understanding of litigation is, I think, very well known. You have a case, you get a lawyer, that lawyer goes to the court, files a case on your behalf.
Sure.
There is a judge sitting there. Okay. Now, arbitration is a system where the parties have the power to decide who judges their case and how is that judge appointed. That judge in this case will be known as an arbitrator.
Okay.
So an arbitration is simply a creature of the contract which is signed between two parties, where you decide, okay, this is how we appoint an arbitrator, this is how the procedure will happen, and this is how the award is to come out. Award which is akin to a judgment.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, why would a person opt for an arbitration? It's a fast track proceeding.
Okay.
A court in a case, a case which is lying in a court may take years for the result to come out. An arbitration will give you the same result in a year. So it's fast track. You don't have to wait for the courts to give you dates. That arbitration tribunal has been created to address your case and only your case. So the tribunal sitting there is dedicated, has been created just to address your matter. So that is why an arbitration is very beneficial. And you see most big companies now, most corporate bodies always go into arbitration before they have to go into court, maybe say an appeal or something. So it fast tracks it. You have a good control over the how proceedings are flowing. It's done by a mutual understanding of both parties, which is why it's such an effective tool. And the arbitral award or the judgment that comes out of this is legally enforceable. So it's a very watertight mechanism. You get the same amount of confidence as you would in a court, but the benefit is that it's fast tracked.
Got it. So I would assume that as a litigation financier, you would prefer cases that go to the arbitration court
Yes.
more than going to the actual court, which might take forever, right? That must be one of your key criteria when you're investing in such cases.
So that's a great observation. If you globally see the pattern of where these litigation funders are plugging in money, you will realize that the most amount of return that they get are from arbitrations.
Okay.
It could be commercial arbitrations, international commercial arbitrations, which is basically arises out of a contract. There has been some breach of contract. These are big commercial matters. Or you have investor state matters,
Okay.
where you invest in a country for some reason that investment has either been nationalized or been taken by that country. So you are in effect invoking an arbitration against that country.
Okay.
Right? And I will give you a very, very great example. I think Beaufort Capital is one of the world's largest litigation funders.
Okay.
In 2015, they bought this claim against the Republic of Argentina,
Okay.
against this entity called YPF SA, was possibly an oil company that was nationalized. So they took over this claim for roughly about 16.5 million USD at that point of time.
Well,
And the judgment in this case was passed in 2023 September, where they stand to make 16.7 billion.
what?
Yes. So you can just see the amount of return you're making from 16 million to 16 billion in its Western
100x?
state arbitration.
100x, I think. Yeah.
Possibly more. Yes, we can see that. For the timing, let me also just clarify that enforcement of judgment is on hold due to certain reasons.
Okay.
But this is just to highlight that, see, this is the kind of return you make in a product.
Right.
But to go back to your question, yes, arbitrations have classically been, I think, the most popular avenue for litigation investors to put in their money. And if I have to talk in the Indian context, now, legal pay has really we've really broken the path. We've really surged ahead to see what is the market like in India. Now, I'm sure all of us will appreciate that in India, getting a timely litigation is a problem.
Correct.
Your case may be stuck in the court for years on end. Now, for us also, I would say, I will be very honest that while we have invested in litigations, for us also the thesis sits better when we invest in arbitrations.
Yep.
It's a time-bound proceeding. The law has been very dynamic. I would say since 2015, the law has been amended at least 2 to 3 times to make sure that we align better with the international principles.
Got it.
So the time taken, of course, is much lesser. And we also know there's a certain amount of predictability there.
Got
We have this amount of control. That predictability goes away when it's purely a litigation matter. And I'm talking about in the Indian context.
Yeah.
Because if you see US or even UK or other countries who are a part of the EU, their litigations are also, I would say, in a normal commercial matter would wrap up in about 3 years. That was the average time that they'd give you. In India, if you ask me how long will it take, I can't possibly give you a timeline. It could take 3 years, but it could also take 7 years. I wouldn't be very sure because that control isn't in my hand. It's not in the hands of the lawyers. It's how the courts operate.
Yeah.
how many dates do you stand to get in a year? So, personally speaking, I do agree that yes, arbitrations, international commercial arbitrations specifically, are the best mode for this method of investment.
Got it. Legal pay when was it started?
Legal pay was started in 2019. So we've been in operation for about 5 years now.
Did anyone try litigation financing before legal pay?
Yes. So, see, I want to be very transparent about the process that we followed. And the best way to learn is that to do your trial and error. Right? We did invest in certain litigations. And we've also been lucky in a way that some of those litigation proceeds have been realized, but some of them are still in the court. So that way, I would say majority, I would say that roughly majority of our cases have been realized because either a settlement has come through or one of the defendants has felt that I maybe don't want to stretch it too far.
Yeah.
But I would say a fair percentage, I would plug it at about 40% of our cases are still in court. The ones that were invested on earlier on. So we then altered our thesis. We realized that, see, maybe litigations, let me also clarify though, we still may get into litigations, but then it has to be a very high stake litigation.
Sure.
That if I have to wait for 5 years, then the return should be suitable to that.
Got it.
So the amount that I would be looking at, it has to be some big litigation for me to be doing that. But for other purposes, I think our investments now have, over a period of time, been more in arbitrations than anything else.
So, I mean, looking at your background, I can see, of course, you have had a flourishing career from divorce lawyers to now litigation financing. But after returning from Germany, you could have joined any major law firm. Why did you decide to enter into legal pay or the litigation financing industry?
Okay. So, like I said, my first love will always be arbitration. It is something I'm truly passionate about. When I heard about litigation funding and something like this gaining ground in India, frankly, it was a very exciting opportunity for me because I feel that almost 10 years into your career, there is, of course, a set pattern that you form in life. There's a bit of a routine, okay, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you see something big come along, something that could, change the legal landscape of a particular country and a country our size, you want to be a part of it. Because this is something so revolutionary. And I say that because this is something that's been tried and tested outside of India.
Sure.
And it's been a runaway success. So I see no reason why something like this wouldn't gain ground in India and also become an equally popular mode of investment, or even to say for people to avail this benefit for themselves as litigants. So that is a challenge that I wanted to be a part of. Like, of course, the biggest hurdle in that where you come in is to create the awareness, right? Only if people know is something like this going to become popular. The other aspect is to really look at the structural integrity of your product. How honest are you being with the product? What is your efficiency? What is the kind of transparency that you maintain? So I think we have in a big way achieved these objectives and we continue to work on the same ideals. And when this opportunity came along and I realized that, see, we could do something so big in India and we're the first ones to do it, I actually thought that, Tanya, see, you've done conventional jobs all your life, okay? It's time to experiment.
Sure.
And be a part of this. I've been here for about a year now and I don't think I've looked back.
Okay, so you mentioned that the Western market is a runaway success.
Yeah.
Can we put some numbers to it? Okay, how big is the Western market as compared to the market in India in terms of litigation financing?
Yeah. So to first draw contrast, the legal expenses, basically how much do people spend on fighting a case?
Okay.
Across the globe, that figure stands at about 400 billion.
Wow. Okay.
Right. And globally, I would say the global investors have captured a market share of roughly about 18 billion in that.
18 billion out of 400.
That is to give you what sort of a potential is there.
Sure.
And then to tell you that, yes, there is about 18 billion that is involved in the process of in litigation investment across the world. Now, US and UK are the world leaders.
Sure.
Now, if I have to draw a contrast, in India, the legal expenses market is, I would have to peg it somewhere at about almost 30 billion.
30 billion.
Yes.
Okay, so
So that is the kind of, because we file annually almost about 2 crore cases a year,
sure.
right? And even if you say take an expenditure of about 1.5 lakh per case, you can do the math and see how big that is. And when I say 1.5 lakh, I'm taking a very conservative figure.
Sure.
Your corporate litigations and arbitrations expenses a lot more. So even on the conservative side, the figure is so big. Now, if I have to really talk about globally what these firms are doing, like I'd mentioned earlier also, they have achieved an ROI of 3x, 4x upon their investment. Their investments are doing so well. Now, globally, they look at individual cases and they look at their portfolio of cases. Their portfolio of cases always also turns out to be quite beneficial because, you're doing a set of cases.
Sure.
And more likely than not, a success of 1 or 2 cases in the portfolio is going to absorb the rest of the portfolio, even if it is not likely to succeed. And the success rate that the international funders have had is between 80 to 92%.
Of the cases they take on.
Yes. So that is the kind of success rate that I'm talking about. And one of the things that I really want to highlight here is that litigation funding, your legal claims as an asset class, is one such asset in terms of investment that is recession proof, that is not really influenced by the forces of market.
Sure.
So I would say, looking at the success rate that has been met by funders abroad, the kind of returns they've had, it is actually quite a successful product to invest in. If I have to talk about our performance in that aspect, I would say we've been met with a success rate of nearly 70%.
Wow.
And the remaining 30 are not the cases that we've lost, are still those cases, because see, these cases, the results will come, it's not a year-on-year result. It will take some time.
Sure.
So I would say those cases are still in the pipeline.
Okay.
So far, touch wood, I've been lucky. We've not dropped a single case. We've not lost a single one. So
Wow, not lost a single case.
Not a single one. And I don't want to jinx it. We've been very lucky that way. But I'm just saying that, see, now I want to come to the reason why. Okay. I'm sure when I say a success rate of 80 to 90%, anybody would think, but okay, how is this working?
Exactly.
The root of this is your underwriting process.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what is underwriting? That would again be, I'm sure somebody who's not really dealt with the legal side of things would always say, what is underwriting? When you get a case, you really want to assess what the strengths of the case are.
Sure.
Why am I not losing a case is because I have ensured that I have done all my due diligence to see that I will in all probability win a case. Is it 100% surety? No.
Sure.
Because you can never predict what the court might interpret the law to be. There are several other factors. But you do take all factors that are under your control and you see, okay, are the merits in my favor? Is this a valid claim? There are several other factors we work for, and then we see that, okay, your underwriting is the backbone of this product.
Sure.
So that any litigation financing firm will tell you, and any of these organizations, that without a strong underwriting team, this product will not be as successful as it has been so far.
Sure. So do you have a team of lawyers who does this underwriting for you?
Yes. So to explain our organization,
Sure.
for litigation financing, we have a team for our organization. We have a team of about 20 lawyers.
Okay.
Now, how it works is, say tomorrow you tell me, Tanya, I have a case. Do you think you'd be interested to pick that up?
Sure.
Can you fund it for me? So I will tell you, Yash, please send me your case. Send me whatever documents you have. I will pass that on to my team. My team will assess quite a few factors, but I will give you the most important factors that we look for. First, of course, is merits of the case.
Okay.
How strong is your case? How good is your claim? Do you really stand to gain everything that you've claimed for?
Sure.
Say there has been a breach of contract. You've asked for some damages, some loss of profit. I have to assess the merits of the case to see, okay, is he right? Does he really, will he really get those claims in the future? The second, and an equally important thing, is for me to assess the party against whom the case has been filed. Do they have the ability to pay?
Okay. Got it.
So for me, asset tracing is one of the most important and the most integral processes of this.
Got it.
Your case may be the best in the world. We may get a great order, great award, judgment in your favor. But if I cannot get it executed,
Sure.
Execution is a simple process of basically whatever judgment that I have, converting that into money. Can I monetize that award? Can I monetize that judgment? If the other party is not in a position to pay you, or they do not have the assets, then for me it's not a very fruitful process. I would probably not step into that. So these are the two most important factors that are there. Other than this, you also look at, okay, which jurisdiction is the case being fought on? Are you likely to get certain claims that you're asking for? How well are they received in a particular jurisdiction?
Got it.
What is the public policy like there? So these are all the factors that you have to take into consideration. You make an underwriting report. Your team assesses, okay, this is how good the case is. And for us personally, we look at a success rate of 60% and above
Okay.
to even consider it for funding. So it has to have a very high likelihood of success for us to be funding that matter. And it all boils down to an efficient underwriting process.
Got it. Do these lawyers themselves go and fight the cases, or do they pass it on to the external teams?
Okay. So the lawyers who are working in-house,
Sure.
according to the Bar Council rules, are not allowed to be litigating lawyers.
Okay.
So they are statutorily barred from appearing in courts.
The litigation financing firm cannot really litigate the case with their own lawyers.
No.
Okay.
There are two reasons for it. The first reason, of course, is that a lawyer in any in-house capacity is no longer eligible to be a litigating lawyer.
Okay.
You actually have to give up your license to practice if you're moving to an in-house. Like most company lawyers, on the not like corporate lawyers, but lawyers who are working for companies
Sure.
are not eligible to practice in courts.
Interesting.
The second thing, and actually the most critical thing here, is a litigation funder shouldn't exercise any amount of control in how the case proceeds.
Got it. So,
A litigation funder has to maintain an arm's distance from how the case is proceeding.
got it.
So what you need to be doing is, you may suggest, but in our case, our clients usually come with their own lawyers. So we've dealt with tier 1 firms, we've dealt with smaller firms, we've dealt with individual lawyers. So it is mostly an option that we leave with our clients. They get their lawyers. We ask them how they want to proceed.
Sure.
We also discuss all the legal implications of the matter. They are the ones who assist us with the due diligence, because they have to provide us the documents, tell us what the legal grounds they're taking. So the legal team that works for us and the legal team that represents the clients in courts are very distinct.
Got it.
We make sure that we maintain our distance from this. Our job is to only fund it and to monitor it. Nothing more than that.
Very interesting, because then you're not colluding with the lawyer doing unfair practice. Yeah, makes sense completely.
Because if I start to do that, there of course will be a problem.
Sure.
I do not want to enter an area where I am, you're muddying the waters. A litigation funder is not supposed to have any interest in the litigation in the terms of how it's being conducted. Of course, you have a monetary interest. You want it to win.
Sure.
But you've had that time to do the underwriting. You had the time to speak to the lawyers. And you've had that time and space and every information with you to decide whether or not you want to be onboarded on this project or not. Beyond that, it's upon the client and the lawyers to take the best course in the matter.
So I guess one of your underwriting process would also include what is the quality of the lawyer that they have got, right?
Yes. So that's a brilliant point you brought up. In our high stake cases,
Yeah.
we would of course want a brilliant team of lawyers.
Sure.
Right. And in that, I wouldn't really specify if they have to be from a particular firm or a chamber practice or not. But when we speak to the lawyers, we want them to be very confident in the matter, have great knowledge, right?
Sure.
You want a quality lawyer on a matter like that where I am putting in my money. So your underwriting is to be great. The team that is fighting the case also has to be equally great.
Sure.
So these are all the stakeholders. You are a stakeholder, your client is a stakeholder, their legal team is a stakeholder. Everybody has to be performing in a fashion that inspires confidence in all three parties.
Sure.
So that is the ecosystem that we try and create, and which is why you would see that, see, litigation finance, nobody's funding 100 cases in a year.
Okay.
If you actually see globally, most of the litigation funders maybe invest in 3 to 4 cases a year.
Really?
Because that is the kind of time you take to do the underwriting, to do your due diligence, to really see where the strategy is going, to have all parties on board. So it's not a quick decision that is made. It's a decision that has been made after you spent a considerable amount of time.
Okay.
So it's I would say this is one of those decisions which is very well backed.
Got it. So as legal pay, how many cases approximately do you fund every year?
So I would say initially, I think we wanted to fund a lot of cases, and we were mostly opting for like portfolios because we had a lot of companies as clients who were coming to us and said that, see, we don't want it to be just one case. If you're funding it, we'd rather just get a portfolio funded through you. So if I have to say portfolio wise, we were almost taking on about roughly about 25 to 30 portfolios a year.
Okay.
We then reached a place where we were dealing with roughly about 300 to 400 portfolios
At a given time.
at a given time.
Okay.
We then, this was actually the portfolios that had accumulated since the time that we started operating.
Sure.
In the recent 1 year, I would say our thesis has changed and we've become more selective.
Okay.
Like I told you, we've had a trial and error phase. We've really tried and seen that which cases work out, which don't.
Sure.
And now we've narrowed down our thesis to say that, okay, now we're going to do the litigation funding in a very selective manner.
Sure.
Only put in the money where we also have to see how much is the time being taken, right? Your return on investment only makes sense if it comes in a certain period of time.
Sure.
If I assure you that it's going to come in 3 years, but it comes in 5, I think you've lost a considerable value of your investment. So these are all the things that we have to take care of, which is why I would say the pool narrows down considerably, right? And in India, of course, we have an added challenge of time. So that is, of course, one thing that we have to keep into consideration. So I would say that we have now narrowed it down and we've made it something very selective.
Got it. Okay, so then coming to my next question, 25 to 30 cases every year. How do you make money out of these cases? I know the broader concept in detail, but what percentage of, let's say, the settlement amounts do you take? What are the sort of IRRs you have been able to achieve? In what kind of tenure? All of these.
Okay. So I'm going to start with the tenure bit first.
Sure.
Right? Our investments are broken down into different tenures. We broadly have 3 slabs.
Okay.
One is about 0 to 24 months.
Okay.
Next, you have a tenure of about say 24 and say 36 months to 60 months.
Okay.
Then we have a tenure of above 5 years.
Okay.
So these are broadly how we categorize. Now, the first 2 tenures that I mentioned are obviously the most beneficial for us, which is where we see the maximum returns. The third slab is important for us because that is where we see that, okay, it might take time, but it's a very high return slab.
Got it.
So we look at it in a cumulative manner for the cases that we have distributed for all 3. Now, what we do is that in a given year, from the capital that we want to deploy, we always see that, listen, my first tenure is where I'm getting my maximum returns for in a quick manner, which is where my cases should go. The next set of cases should go in my second slab. Then, of course, there are some exceptional cases that will fall in the third. And as far as our IRR is concerned, I think we've had an IRR of almost 20 to 27%. Okay. In the cases where the life cycle has been completed of the cases that we've done, like about the 70% of the cases that I told you about, our ROI has been on an average of 3x.
Wow.
So those are the numbers that we have been operating on. Now, there are, of course, cases that have been there in the longer run, but hoping that all things go in our favor and the results come in the next couple of years, there we would be making an ROI of almost 6 to 7x.
Wow. But can you talk to these lawyers midway also? Because you said you can't really influence or you can't really...
So I will tell you, actually I'll give you a sort of a day-to-day working of how it does to give you a clarity of how we operate. Say today you have tomorrow you have your matter, right? And you are supposed to ask, say it's for a interim order. Interim order is a relief that you can ask for in the middle of a legal proceeding. What you will do is, any day a case happens, a day before that or 2 days before that, you always have a conference with your lawyers.
Sure.
A client and the lawyer will always have a conference to see what is our strategy for tomorrow. What are we going to be saying? Mostly clients do it to see how well have the lawyers prepared. Lawyers want to know from the client, is there any other input that you may have to give us or any new information? I would basically be a spectator in that. I would be a part of that meeting. I would know that, okay, tomorrow they're going to ask for an interim relief. These are the grounds that they're asking for. These are the laws that they have to back it up. I may or may not have a suggestion, But the lawyers also have an option of taking that suggestion or not taking it.
Sure. Okay.
So I can always be a sort of a participant, but I cannot have control.
Got it.
So that is the distinction we always make. But yes, to answer your question, we can always ask for updates. We are part of the meeting. So
Got it.
we are always clued in as to what is happening in the case, because of course we also have to keep our investors
Exactly.
informed about the same. That what stage is it at? Because like I initially mentioned, that we've been lucky in a way that a lot of our cases have settled.
Sure.
Right? So we've not even had to deploy that particular capital that we had kept aside for a case for the entire duration, because we didn't have to do that. So we had leftover capital from that, which we are now free to deploy in another matter.
Got it. And let's say if I win hypothetically 1 crore as a settlement amount from my case, what is the cut that legal pay would take?
Okay, so the cut that we will take depends upon how long is that tenure going to be,
Okay.
how much have we had to invest in that. Now, globally, if you see, there is a logical question that how much do you spend on a case?
Sure.
We usually, globally, the trend is that they spend about 10% of the claim amount.
Okay.
We've been able to keep it anywhere between 4 to 7%.
Okay.
So that is how much we spend on a case. So to see how much cut I will take back largely depends on the duration,
Okay.
right? How much investment, of course, we've made on that. And given the time frame, like the 3 tenures that I told you, it can be anywhere from 10 to 35%. 35% being the extreme high limit, which falls in my longest tenure. I know that that matter is going to take several years, but I would say an average cut of about 20 or 22%.
That's impressive. And given your win rate, of course, you're going to make 3x, 4x money anyway. Very impressive. So how much money have you deployed until now into all of these cases?
Okay, so I will tell you, let's, in that aspect, if we want to see, let's talk about how we deal with our cases, right? So the pipeline that we have, or the cases that we have where we could potentially deploy money, the value of that right now stands somewhere about 3,500 crores.
Okay.
Now, if I really have to deploy the money on all of those cases, say with the percentage that I gave you, between say an average of 5%, I would need somewhere around 175 crores to be able to deploy it on all. But that is not how we work.
Okay.
What we do is, we always have a pool of cases.
Okay.
We keep, because the requests come in, they stay, because cases are there for a long time.
Sure.
And with this legal financing, you can also choose to invest at any stage of the case. So it's not like it has to be a fresh case for me to invest.
Sure.
I could also be putting an investment at the final hearing stage or somewhere halfway through.
Sure.
So the investment can come in at any stage. The reason I'm telling you that is that when we have a pool of cases, we always say that yes, this may be a good case, but maybe not for right now.
Sure.
I may not want to plug in my capital for next 5 years. But maybe certain developments happen in the case where I feel that, okay, now the timeline is considerably shortened. Now I'm in a position to invest in that case. So on a yearly basis, what we do is, through our underwriting, we prepare a pool of cases through the pipeline that we have.
Okay.
We then speak to our investors because we have family offices who are investing in our product. And we've also aligned with the sort of investors who have an idea about this and who are willing to invest in these cases. For example, we have family offices who would be more interested in doing construction arbitrations.
Okay.
There would be somebody more interested in funding mining cases, simply because they have better understanding of the industry, right? So for us, that's also a big factor. That you can't always invest in all those cases. Your investor also has to have that confidence in that particular field.
Got it.
Right? It could be something as diversified as broadcasting rights, like I mentioned, construction, mining. There is a lot that there is on the plate. So we prepare our pool of cases which we think are very strong, have a high chances of winning. We then float it by our investors. The investors then plug in the money. So it's not like we have I would say, how the concept of AUM works.
Sure.
Right? We are a little different from that. That doesn't really apply to us. We get our capital, and then if I have to calculate some of those cases in my first 2 slabs, the money is coming. I now have the ability to deploy that capital again in different cases.
Got it.
So it's sort of working on a more rotational basis, if I have to say.
So for you, claims under management is the major fixture.
Yes.
See you.
Yes. So AUM isn't very relevant to the way we function.
So I think when I first came across LegalPay, you guys also had an option for retail investors to invest via an SPV like LLP or private limited. Is that option still available for retail investors?
So LegalPay has been in the business for 5 years.
Sure.
There are a lot of things that we did in the beginning to see where does this thesis sit right.
Okay.
Which also included the insolvency bankruptcy market, our regular LF model for commercial cases.
Okay.
So these are all the things that we were dabbling in with the lives. However, after experimenting with all of this, now we've come to a stage where our business model is something that is set.
Okay.
We've realized what works for us, what is the formula, where it's working, where are we making money, where is our investor confidence the most. Now that has come up obviously in a very obvious realization that this product is not meant for retail investors. Because the investment is high, the time taken is also high. So I would not frankly encourage a retail investor to be investing in something like this. I'm hopeful to say that maybe in 5 years from now, we would have reached a place where we would be able to open it up to retail investors.
Sure.
Because see, litigation funding with home offices, HNIs are easy because you get that capital, that corpus to put it in a matter. If I had to talk about retail investors, I would maybe have to pool in those investments, see where, put it in different cases.
Sure.
Which is something, frankly, I'm not very comfortable with.
Okay.
I'd rather have an investor backing me up on a matter rather than pooling and breaking different and small investments and then distributing it over matters. That thesis maybe should work for us in a few years from now, but as of today, that's not something I would encourage or be open to.
Got it. And by the way, do these cases come to you directly or do you go and pitch to them that, let us fund you?
It works both ways.
Okay.
Now we've reached a stage that most of our cases are on the basis of inbound leads.
Okay.
Word of mouth has helped us a lot. From our existing clientele, we get a lot of references.
Got it.
And of course, there is, we have established a certain name in the market, we get inbound leads. But that does not discount the efforts of outreach because like you very well noted at the beginning of the thing, because it's still relatively unknown.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of even the tier 1 law firms have not really stepped into the concept, have not really leaned in completely. So I do feel that it's very important for me to be able to reach out, give them that confidence so that we get even more diverse matters, get more law firms involved in this, because that is how you will create an ecosystem where this product can be a success with a greater amount of stakeholders.
And from speaking to a couple of members in the legal industry, I was told that litigation financing was considered as illegal back in India. Is that true, or that was just misrepresentation or interpretation of how it all works right now?
Okay. So Yash, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing this up, because you're not the first person to tell me this. I have come across this question several times, and I'm happy I'm getting to use your platform to clarify this. The short answer is it's absolutely legal.
Okay.
Litigation funding is not barred by any law in this country. The longer answer, I'll elaborate how. So, the earliest judgments, like India is a common law country. Law is also laid out through the precedents, the judicial pronouncements that come through. The earliest cases, it was a Privy Council case, which is famously known as the Chandrakanto Mukherjee case. The court noted that, see, litigation finance is completely legal as long as it's not extortionate, unconscionable, unequitable.
Got it.
So these three principles always have to be kept in mind. Then this was followed up by a more recent judgment of A.K. Balaji,
Okay.
where the distinction was created that, see, a lawyer cannot do litigation funding.
Okay.
A lawyer, that's it. Therefore, any third party that is independent of that matter can do litigation financing.
Which is where you guys don't get involved.
That is where we come in. Because in this country, the only person who cannot do litigation financing is a lawyer.
Got it.
Any other interested party who can do third-party financing is free to get into that.
So if I want to tomorrow, let's say, fund a case, I can go and independently fund a case as well. Like not via your platform, but directly as well. Given that I have the knowledge and I'm comfortable.
If you see, the thing is that the idea of litigation financing, like I emphasized before also, needs a strong infrastructure, right? Legally, yes, there's nothing barring you from investing it.
Okay.
As long as you have a strong contract. Now, again, I would also give you an example of, say, Germany. Okay. So, in Germany, litigation finance works on a very simple basis of contracts. It's treated as any other contract would be treated.
Okay.
And we are also right now working on the same principle, that your litigation finance contracts, the litigation funding agreement has to be very strong.
Sure.
And that agreement has come through after your underwriting, after a term sheet has been made on that underwriting, parties have negotiated all the terms, you finally come to the agreement which has all your rights and obligations. What it's also important to emphasize on what rights do litigants have.
Sure.
You have to ensure that the case is going on in an honest way. You can't be colluding with the other side and keep us in the dark.
Sure.
There are certain measures that you always have to take. Basically, keep your matter clean, keep the procedure clean, keep your lawyers honest, do an honest job of this, and you're good. With us, our obligations are that, okay, because when you invest in a case, you don't invest in one go. You keep it at different levels.
Sure.
Say, I have a new case today. I will perhaps put in some capital for the filing of the matter, for the lawyers to be drafting that, and the initial fees that has to be paid. Then I will maybe infuse another chunk halfway through the case. Then maybe somewhere towards the end of the case. So, although you could also deploy the capital in one go, but we've seen through experience it's better practice to keep infusing capitals at different milestones of the case.
That will help you get a stock of what's happening as well.
Yes. And you also always know that, see, you shouldn't always put all your money in one place in one go.
Sure.
I think that is just a basic investor thinking that we all have, right?
Sure.
That should I be putting all my money in one go? Should I be spacing it out a bit? So it's the latter approach that we've adopted, right? And so far it's worked well for us. So I think we're going to continue doing that. And I mean, that is where the whole picture of what we are doing comes in. It should be structured, which brings me back to what the agreement. Your rights and obligations, how does it have to be structured? When do we get paid? All of those stages have to be very well defined in your contract, because even my investment is safeguarded in that one particular contract.
Got it.
So that is one of the biggest jobs. So yes, of course, you can go fund a case if you do feel like it, but you will need a strong underwriting support. You
Sure.
will need a strong legal brain on your side to see all of those things are in order.
Sure. Just curious, has it ever happened that you have funded a case and the party has won the case, but they have not paid your settlement amount? Like, how do you protect yourself? Of course, ironclad contracts, but people can still run away, right? Companies can still fraud you.
So again, a great question. And these things actually do tend to happen in India,
Sure.
where I mean, I will be very honest about this. I've had a few clients come up to me and said, okay, we won the case. Can we reduce the amount a little bit? Yes, I know we agreed upon this matter, but can we agree? See, most of the time when it comes in, we have to tell them that you benefited from this partnership a lot.
Sure.
Chances are that as a company, you will still need our help, right? And if today, I mean, I will, of course, go to the court and enforce my contract, but I have to find that midway balance between being able to keep that relationship with my clients versus also ensuring that my rights are being realized.
Sure.
So we've had these conversations. Thankfully, we've never had to give in,
Okay.
right? But if the situation comes in, because of the amount of effort that we've put in, our investors' money going in, I will, of course, get my contract enforced in court. Because the thing is that, like I said, it's so ironclad that it's not going to take a long time for the court to come to that decision.
Okay.
Let's see, this is what is written down. There is no backing away from this. And I also feel that clients wouldn't want to go that far.
Yeah.
So in most cases, it's just a conversation that they have, because I feel we as Indians, I myself am guilty of that. We love a little bit of a bargain.
Yeah.
We love a little bit of that negotiation scope that, oh, can I get a bit of a discount?
Yeah.
But so far, it's only been a part of discussion. As far as the realizations have been concerned, that has never been impacted by this.
Sure. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Do you have any competitors at the moment?
See, in our line of work, because we were the first movers, it's always a job to keep a tab on, if there's somebody as good coming up. But so far, there is nobody in the market with even a comparable market share of what we are doing. So I haven't really come across any players dabbling in or even becoming 10% as close to what we've done. I'm hoping, of course, that, competition brings in fresh blood.
Sure.
It also creates more awareness. So I always welcome healthy competition. But as I see the market right now, I can't really think of any competitors who would be in the field.
How much market share do you have right now, estimated?
See, with all of our cases, since we are the only ones,
Okay.
right? We have about, almost 3,500 crores worth of cases that we could potentially be deploying on, part of which we've already done. By the end of this year, that should reach a figure of about 6 to 7.
1,000 crores.
Yes. So we are steadily capturing more and more of the market. Of course, there's a vast majority of the market which is still untapped, but we want to do it in a very cautious manner.
Sure.
The thing is that, you don't want to expand too fast. It's like if you're just going too close to the sun. We have realized that, we want our growth to be very sustainable. So it's not the question of how much market share do we want to capture. How much of that market share is truly realizable, right? I'll give you a very simple example. One of the largest cases, one of the largest group of cases that are being fought in India are land cases. I think every family we know has somebody involved in a land matter. There is some ancestral property not being given, wills being contested. Would I personally invest in a matter like that? No. Because those matters go on for 10 years, 20 years, several generations. So you also have to discount these matters from that market share that I'm talking about.
Sure.
I am looking at commercial matters. I am looking at arbitrations, right? If you see a general pool of litigations, which is a lot bigger, right? But do I even want to capture certain sections of the market? The answer is no.
No. Okay.
I have to see which market section translates well for me as an investment product.
Got it. Makes sense.
Also, the other thing that I have to see, a lot of these litigations may not always lead to monetary realization.
Okay.
Say you want to go to a court to enforce a right, right? So the order will always be, okay, this person is allowed to do this. This is well within his right. You're not getting money out of it. So not all cases can be monetized.
Yep.
So the monetization, the time taken, the nature of case are all the things that also sort of narrow down my market share.
Sure.
So these are the things I have to be very conscious about. Therefore, my growth has to be very steady on that side to really capture what I want in the market.
But to you, there is still a big healthy market that you need to capture, right?
Absolutely. I think the Indian legal market, if I'm not wrong, is probably the third largest in the world.
Yeah.
It's a booming market. See, things may change, recession may come, people are not going to stop filing cases.
Sure.
Legal cases will always be on the rise.
Yeah.
So I think on the supply end, I have nothing to complain about. The market is only expanding. And one of the things that I would really like to, like I've said several times through our talk today, that courts take a long time. In India, it's like a pathological problem that is going to be there. But I also want to stress on the good parts, right? Arbitration Act has had so many changes. Commercial Courts Act has gone through so many amendments. So I feel like legislatively also we're trying to align ourselves well. So I think with time we're going to meet that, that sweet spot in the middle where the law is with us, the time is aligning, and we will be able to make that sort of a money. And I think we will reach that point sooner than later.
Okay, so what are your future plans as Legal Pay as an entity? Of course, 6,000, 7,000 crores claims under management. But any new exciting products?
I would say yes. Okay, so but before that, I would just like to tell you that litigation financing traditionally is done for claimant side. What does that mean? That we mostly fund the person who's filing the case.
Sure.
Not the person against whom the case is being filed, right?
Correct.
Now we've come up with a defense side product.
Okay.
We've realized that in India in particular, like I said, you can win the case. But if the other person is not willing to pay you, or if you can't get your order or your judgment or your award executed,
sure,
where does that leave you? So we then realized that there is an urgent need in the market where a lot of these defendants have the intention to pay,
sure,
but they may not have the means to.
Okay.
Like I may not have the liquidity to pay you back the full award amount.
Got it.
So we are working in that space. We are working with our partner NBFC to make it as a sort of a finance product and to help the defendants pay back their decree. And we've actually already started, and this gained a great amount of traction because nobody wants a legal liability on their head.
Sure.
So people have been coming to us to say that how can you help us finance our debts? How can we pay it back to them?
Got it.
So, and that we work in a subvention fee model there. So that is something that's gained traction, and defense side funding is something that we're very excited to branch out in, because not a lot of global players have also done that in a big way.
I think that was very insightful, Tanya. Learned a lot about litigation. Hopefully, I don't have to fight a case someday. But if I do, then we'll come to you. Coming to the end of this podcast, fun question we like to ask everyone as to how do you invest your own personal assets or money that you have accumulated?
Okay. So I think my investments have always been in very conventional instruments.
Okay.
FTs, mutual funds mostly. The one thing that I have, I mean, even my family, I mean, there's something that I've learned like that, is to invest in art.
Oh,
Art is something that gains value every year.
okay.
So I've made some investments in certain renowned Indian artists. You give examples of, say, Souza or Raza or Anjoli Menon. Their paintings, of course, they increase in value every year.
Wow.
And it also gives me a sort of satisfaction that I've been able to sort of invest in the Indian art scene, which is so understated. And I really feel that it should get more spotlight than it has in the world. So that is, I think, one thing that I like to do. And that, of course, investment-wise also gives me great value.
Wow.
Because I'm talking about the value going almost 100x
Wow.
in some of these artworks.
Has that happened with you?
Not yet, but one day.
Sure, I wish so. No, definitely. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was lovely having you. We learned a lot about litigation, financing, and arbitration as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yash, for having me, and for actually giving me a platform to clarify so many misconceptions, to express so many things. That is something that we always need as an organization.
That's it for today. Thank you for watching. If you are not part of the Alt Investor community, do join in. It's free. The link is in the description. I hope you got to learn a lot more about litigation financing. While LegalPay does not allow retail investors to invest with them right now, we do hope in the future they do allow. Do like and share this video if you found the conversation useful, and subscribe to our channel for more regular updates. Thank you.